they've offered him, have they? Oh, are we live?
We're live here, so we're going to be going on radio in a moment, so stand by.
All right. Hello, people.
We're live on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA online at the Big1050.com. And you know how we do it every single Thursday. We catch up with the crew from MGoBlog for the MGoBlog Roundtable, and joining us from MGoBlog, like we like to start it off, our good friend Seth Fisher. Seth, how you doing this morning?
I'm good. I'm wearing my Sack the Stigma sweatshirt right now, and I think that a lot of people wanted, especially someone on our message board, wanted me to apologize specifically to Wink Martindale for how we talked about him last year. And I want to make sure that people understand this. I have one major complaint about Wink Martindale. He has not fixed it. And until he does, I'm going to continue to criticize him. You see this sweatshirt? Look at these sleeves. You see like the smiles and the frowns on the sleeves? This is the best part of the sweatshirt, Wink. Those sleeves are awesome, and you cut them off. What are you doing? This is you know how many people would buy this sweatshirt right now, which you can get at sackthesigma.com? This sweatshirt is amazing, but you cut off the best part. And I am going to continue to criticize him for that.
You go ahead and do it. I'm not going to argue with the OG.
You should mention that, because the criticism of Wink actually came up in my sit down with Sharon earlier this week, which we'll get to coming up. We've actually been breaking that down all week. We'll be releasing the video coming up here, but we already have written, like, I think Alejandro's written like 10 stories.
Yeah,
on that sit down already. We played the first half of it as far as the audio is concerned this morning here on the air, and we'll be releasing the video here shortly. But first, I want to welcome Craig Ross.
Hey.
Hello, Craig. How are you this morning?
It's nice and warm in Hawaii, but probably cooler than it is in Ann Arbor right now. You know, I wonder, in your sit down with Sharon, of interest to MSU and Ohio State fans, did he say when the hammer was coming down?
No, I didn't. I didn't ask.
You didn't ask him that? Okay.
I didn't ask him about the hammer like I asked Ward about the hammer. It felt more. It felt more. It felt more prudent. It was more well placed to ask Ward about it.
Yeah.
Than it was Sharon. So Ward had more authority on the matter, and so. I know what I got. I know he wouldn't even been able to do it. You ask a question that you can actually get an answer to, right? And
right.
So I got an answer.
Yeah.
I got an answer from Ward on it, and he said he hadn't had any discussion at all on the hammer, and wasn't expecting anything like that. So anyway, but about Wink, and for those who don't know, I had an exclusive sit down with Sharon a couple of days ago, where he came in to the studio for an hour. We actually did it over on at our friends at UTEC let us use their conference room for it, and we talked about the reception for Wink Martindale, because you guys, I mean, you remember what it was like. Wink's the architect of the defense, and they're returning a lot of parts from a championship unit. So of course it's just supposed to hit the ground running, right? And it did work out like that, as you guys will remember.
I wonder if one of the key moments of the 2024 offseason was Wink Martindale met Rod Moore. And he hangs out with this guy from it, and he's just like, oh my God, these college kids are smarter than my NFL players. And so I don't have to do anything. I don't have to go and install these things. They know what they're doing. Look at this guy, Rod Moore. And the problem was Rod Moore is a freak and was making all, he can do that kind of stuff. But when you go and try to do that with Zeke Berry, who's a brand new starter, he's not going to notice that, like, okay, if the tackle is set up like this, then I have to change my check and I can't hit my nickel blitz, right? So I think I went over a lot of the stuff again when we were doing Hail of the Victors and tried to reassess what happened with Martindale's play calling. And I really think the story is, and I'm not inside of his head, right? I can't say this directly. I can say what I saw on film, which is I think that he came in thinking that he could install very complex things in college, and not all of the players, some of them could get it. Sometimes they did get it, and sometimes Jayshon Barham just did not see the thing that he was supposed to see to know that he has to change what he's supposed to do before the play so that he follows the running back out in the flat. And then no one follows him in the flat, and Wink looks like he's screwing things up. The other thing he did, I thought, was he tried to he overthought things, right? He's got Mason Graham playing edge on their three-man package, on their pass rush package on third down. And that kind of thing, like in the NFL, okay, moving your best player around somewhere is going to change where their focus is because the way the game is played at the NFL level. In the college level, you really can just, press the Mason Graham kills people play. And then next play, you can be like, let's play that. Let's do that one again. And it's just, that's the way the game is played. They're more hunting matchups, and they're just trying to it's not super damn complicated. So if he's thinking that way, he's overthinking things. He's leaving things open that a pro quarterback wouldn't even trust. And I think that as he kind of looked at things and they had a little break, and then especially at the very end of the season, Northwestern, Oregon, and then, of course, in Ohio State, he had a great game plan. When they came back to that, he really changed his approach. And you never see this. You never, especially from an older guy, never see somebody change like the way that they are thinking about the game when it's worked for them for so long. And that is really, really impressive that he was able to do that. And the thing he changed was he stepped back from the things that make him look smart and made his players go and do things that were hard. And I think that was that's a very college response to things, and I think that it worked very well for him, and it brought out a level of play from this defense that we hadn't seen all season, and has me really excited for what happens this year. But it was a very different coach we had the very end of the season in Wink Martindale, I thought, than we had for most of the season.
Yeah,
Great.
I'm just going to say, maybe to simplify it a bit, though, I mean, he was getting no help from the offense. And also, I mean, and it's nice when a defense can get some help, at least from the offense, and they were not. And in the main. And I think the rest of it you've expressed well, is that sometimes there's also just going to be a period of comfort where the players become comfortable with the system, and the coach becomes comfortable with the players and what they can do, and certainly by the end of the year that comfort level was obvious. I mean, they play Alabama with the JVs, and Alabama doesn't move the ball. They're playing without 3 or 4 top NFL picks, and it doesn't matter. So yeah, what happened over the season defensively was pretty remarkable. I agree, and your explanation is as good as any. I'm sorry, Sam. Go ahead.
No, you hit on a couple of things. I do think that there was an element of is what they could do in his scheme, and figuring out how much of that they could really do. So is there an element of simplification? Sure, I think there's an element of the difference between college and pros, and how much teaching you have to do with college guys. I think there's certainly some of that. I got that from the players. I remember having that conversation with Will. I told that story here before. He's like, some of these young guys, man, you gotta tell them the A, the B, and the C of it. Like, you got to see every single detail. Not like with a veteran, or like with the pros who they are just so experienced, you can just give them an instruction and they'll know how to execute all of the things that lead up to the end goal. You can't expect that with like a lot of these young guys, and that's an adjustment for a lot of pro coaches. What Sharon talked about was the process of a not just a pro coach but of an entire staff and of a veteran successful unit growing in comfort and in trust. Like when you have had success, like when you are really, really good, these like the Masons and the KGs and that defensive unit, when you're really good and really successful, and when you're Wink Martindale and you're really good and you're really successful, you're used to doing things a certain way and you think that's the way to do it. So when somebody comes in and they're telling you to do it a different way, it takes a minute for you to kind of grow that comfort and that trust that what they're telling you when they say do it different is like, okay, that's gonna work. It works that way too. I'm not saying that you don't respect them, but it's like, I mean, there's that natural hesitancy. Like, man, we just won a championship doing it this way, and you're saying to do it that way, or man, I created this doing it another way. What do you mean you guys did it? I taught all those guys. So you saw over the first half of the season that push pull in the process. Even of course you had young guy mistakes, but you had some old guy mistakes too. You had old guys out of position, and he said, yeah, it was you had enough trust in with those guys that they didn't bail. It might have been some hesitancy there, here and there, where they were getting used to one another. You had to get used to Wink's way. Wink had to get to know these guys and what they could do, what they could execute, what they like. And then about the middle of the season, they all got a feel for one another. And because they hadn't bailed, because you didn't have guys with pro prospects that said, forget it, I'm done. Because you didn't have a veteran coach to say it's my way or the highway and just wrote guys off, because they were all still dialed in. Once you get the midway point, all of a sudden, now it starts to click. Now he has a good idea what they can do, right? Okay, my front, maybe we can, as far as the pressures are concerned, we can rely on the front a little bit more. I'm like a lot of man, but be more strategic with when we use it, right? As far as how we play on the back end, we're gonna help our guys a little more on the back end. A guy like Zeke Berry, understand his versatility a little more. So when we have some injuries, we know he's a guy we can move around. Understand the versatility of a guy like Makari Page. Know he's a guy that we can move around. He can come up and he can play nickel. You start to understand your personnel better as a staff. The guys on the field start to trust the coaches a bit more, and you see the result at the end. And Sharon kind of alluded, he alluded to that. The trust and belief factor kind of being the glue that holds them together. And once they got that feel for one another, they just took off. And by the end of the season, he said, yeah, man, we watched Scarface the night before the Ohio State game. And he said the lights on the Goodyear blimp read the world is yours. He said we walked into that Ohio State game and they had no idea how much Tony Montana had inspired us as we came down the tunnel. So no, the Wink thing was interesting to watch, because fans had written Wink off. But it would have been very easy for guys on the team who had won a championship to do the same thing, but they didn't.
Along these lines, maybe you guys know Rod Moore. Is he someone that it's going to play this year? They redshirt him again and get him ready for the following year. I mean, do you have any?
I think he's going to play. It's just what's the timeline for it? Okay. So you'll hear from Rod. So I got my behind the uniform roster set. It's been in flux. Who are going to be my behind the uniform guys this year, and Rod is one of them. So we'll have Rod on here this summer, and we'll talk to him about it. But his well, we'll see him. It's just at what point is the question.
The other one I've got a question about, as maybe you guys know, is David Nasternak said to me his impression was Mikey Keene is out for the year. I said, where did you get that?
What?
Yeah, is that? I mean, and you know anything about Mikey Keene's status? I said, well, he was out in the spring. I mean, nothing.
No, I haven't heard.
No, I thought he was actually better almost by the end of spring, and they're he missed spring
for
that.
Impression. So
yeah, and the way that Sharon Moore is talking about right now, I still fully expect Bryce to be starting against New Mexico, but the way that Sharon was talking about him in that interview, and maybe Sam can speak more to this, it sounded like oh no, he's going to have to compete with Mikey. It wasn't saying he's going to have to compete with Jaden. He wasn't saying he's going to have which there's a different flavor to that conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think yeah. So I think that Mikey Keene is healthy. I think that if Mikey Keene had been healthy in spring, maybe the story is a little different, but they're such different players, right? Mikey Keene is just a very different quarterback. And if you're going to go Bryce, you just got to go Bryce, right? You have to start planning a lot of simpler reads. You have to start finding ways to have his feet be a third option in the passing game. And that's just not going to be Mikey Keene's game at all. And also just the kinds of passes you can make with Bryce. You're never going to ask Mikey Keene to throw. You're never going to have Mikey Keene throw to the sideline 30 yards downfield, right? You're not going to have him throw deep outs like that. That's just not his game. He doesn't have the arm strength to do that. Bryce Underwood, I mean, that's open to you. That's his game. So I think having Keene out in spring made it very clear where they had to go as far as offensive game planning and what they're going to do and what they're going to practice, and gave Bryce more opportunities to have reps at what he does best.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear him talk about the Bryce, how you from a competition standpoint, how you balance growing him up with a genuine competition. Because like you said, if you're gonna go Bryce, like you gotta be very intentional about that. Like you gotta design your plan around, hey, we gotta be growing him up. And that's not always, to do that and then have a genuine competition at the same time is not necessarily the two aren't necessarily, they don't necessarily run in parallel. Michigan is going to have to do it that way. I think they're going to be able to, because Bryce was able to get he was able to get all the snaps in the spring. And so they were able to really kind of and you had another young guy in Jaden too, where they were doing things that you wouldn't necessarily do if there was a veteran quarterback that was over there as well. Like you gotta throw some things at these young guys that you wouldn't necessarily throw if there was a veteran quarterback over there. Like you got to do some of these things, some grow up things with these guys. That's just the lay of the land. So I think it was beneficial from that standpoint. Not that you ever want to see an injury to a quarterback, but having him out, I think it lent itself to the maturation of Bryce Underwood, that the things that you have to do to help a young quarterback, they were able to spend time on that in the spring, like the timeline that we laid out in some of the reporting, like the early practices where he was looking really good and they weren't really throwing a lot at him. And then all of a sudden it's like boom, they start laying the hammer all of a sudden, and he starts swimming for a time, and then he starts to adapt. Would that have really been the same if Mikey Keene had been around? I don't know that the pacing would necessarily be the same for Mikey Keene as it was for Bryce Underwood, if you get my meaning. So
yeah. I think that also it's the type of offense you're going to want to run, right? This is this is Cade and JJ all over again, except for to extreme levels, right? You have Mikey Keene, who's he wants to get a lot of information from the defense before the snap, and then because he's thrown, an ungodly number of passes in his college career. He threw a ton at Fresno, and he spent a year as the starter, most of a year as a starter when Dylan Gabriel got hurt at UCF, and that was with the same offensive coordinator with Chip Lindsey, right? So, and then you get into what Chip Lindsey likes to do, and I kind of went back to I watched a lot of UNC with Drake May, and then I watched a little UNC before Chip Lindsey, because Drake May was a starter the season before that and had a great year, and kind of got the sense of what he likes to do with his quarterbacks, which is he likes to give them the same read from a lot of different looks, right? He confuses the defense by having guys line up in different ways. But then when you go back to what the read really is, the eyes go to the same spots. And so you get that quarterback very comfortable with those same reads. And then he has one little change up he throws in. So every single route combination, any guy at any moment might completely go off script and go downfield. And I don't know if this is game planned or how they do it or what they're looking at. But the idea is to have these shots, and the idea is to take the shot when it comes. So they want these shots downfield. They have it. I saw, I think 2 of them in the spring game. Bryce overthrew one of them that got wide open to Channing Goodwin, if I recall. But like he has these just, the idea is the safeties are starting to come down because they start seeing those same spots, right? And you get the defense thinking, maybe I can pick one of these off. And as soon as they start reacting to it, that's when you just hit them over the top. And the idea is to get those big shots. And Drake May had a massive jump in his efficiency through this system because they just took a lot off his plate, really. But then they added these long bombs instead of having all these different types of concepts that he was running. So I think that if you're trying to translate that to what they're doing with Bryce, my guess is they're trying to get Bryce very comfortable with 2 or 3 concepts where the reads are basically the same and the spots are the same, and then start adding in those downfield shots. And I mean, they're already in there in the spring game, so they're in the they're in the playbook. I don't think that you would approach that remotely the same way if it was Mikey Keene.
Yeah, one of the interesting things to me is going to be how liberally they incorporate his legs into the equation. I mean, it's going to be a balancing act for them, because I mean, it certainly changes the dynamic of this offense. It helps the running game, it helps the offensive line tremendously, but you got to balance it with the, how much at risk do you want to put your quarterback, right? In the past, Chip has been willing to put his quarterback out there. I mean, it's just part of the game. You got to be judicious with it, but you want to present the threat more than Michigan has presented the threat in the past, right? So
yeah, well, Chip was with Gus Malzahn for a while, so he was already starting with running quarterbacks, and then Drake May was a running quarterback too, right? That was he actually scales those back. In most of his stops, I think what you've seen he did with Dylan Gabriel as well. He goes in, he has a running quarterback, and then scales it back a little bit. Now, if you go watch Bryce at Belleville, they used his legs a lot in that offense. That was basically the third read in every single play. And Bryce took a lot of hits. He was their main running back. He was the main rushing attack for that offense. And a lot of his quote passes were really just RPOs that were designed to be Bryce runs, unless the outlet was available. So, and he was very good at that, right? He would have been the best running back in the state if you just take away all the passing. So, they're going to incorporate that for sure because it's an ezy thing to do, and he can take hits. He's big.
Here's the thing: all hits aren't created equal. When you're getting hit by, not to say that those hits didn't hurt at times, but you're getting hit by a lot of little high school dudes, big college dudes. Those hits accumulate different, right? So yeah, the calculus is going to be different with how often we see it, but you gotta present the threat. And this was an interesting part of the discussion with Sharon, as you guys will see when we put it out. There was a part of the discussion with him where I asked him about what's the Chip Lindsey effect, right? We know that you want to keep the running game the same, right? That goes without saying. And we talked about how do you do that? Do you keep the running playbook as is and Chip just comes in and learns that playbook? Like, how do you do that? So he talked about that. And then the parts that you change, like what is his effect? And after, kind of talking through that, we started talking about running into loaded boxes. Now, one thing I know about Chip before he got here is he is an RPO guy. Period. Like that's just his part of his DNA. We didn't get a chance to really dive deep into the discussion because we had to be nimble with our time. But Sharon kind of said, yeah, we a lot of loaded boxes. We had some success, and we ran into those. And I said, yeah, Sharon, a lot of coaches RPO that. He said, yeah, and I ran into it. A lot of fans didn't like that. Right. And so is there a shift and there a change there? Even if we had time to discuss that, fellas, I don't know that he would be really too revealing there, because that probably tells a little bit too much how the sausage is made than he would be too ready to open up about. But that will be something to watch, because that is a Chip Lindsey thing. He RPOs, and Michigan has been very, I won't say anti-RPO, but that has not been a part. It's in the playbook, but every once in a blue moon, other than, even last year when they could have benefited mightily, because nothing was really working. They pulled out RPOs in the Northwestern game. It was like, man, where's that all season? Then after the Northwestern game, we didn't see it again, right?
Well, because Northwestern's a zone. There's a lot of talk of like, okay, Michigan's going to be able to use Samaj Morgan in the slot a lot more because they didn't use him very much last year. Well, you know why you can't throw screens to the slot to Samaj Morgan last year? Because the safeties were 5 yards off the line of scrimmage and looking for that. Why? Because there's no threat of throwing downfield. And last year, I think there was a lot of criticism last year for Kirk Campbell, where we really didn't know. Because the thing we were operating on was, Alex Orji's a quarterback. He's probably can throw the ball. Couldn't throw the ball, right? As soon as you saw, he had guys wide open downfield, and there was another guy even more wide open downfield, and he missed him so far it became an interception. And then as soon as he was allowed to throw the ball in the bowl game, he threw an interception. It was not an option. And as soon as that was scouted, as soon as that was known, there was no way that they could play that way. And Warren, the guy is a warrior. He beat Ohio State, but also not the most accurate guy, and he didn't see everything in front of him, which is understandable. He didn't get to throw that many passes in high school, and he was, a very young player as far as experience is concerned because of what he'd been through. So he just didn't see it, and then when he did see it, he wasn't accurate. So they didn't have the option to pass. Now, if you want to throw RPOs, if you want to beat RPOs, what do? You play man. And Northwestern can't play man. They don't have the players. But I think that's what most teams are going to do to Michigan, because they don't have the receivers that are really going to beat you in man-to-man, or at least they haven't shown they have yet. So that's what you're going to have to do, is have Bryce Underwood just eat them up in man coverage, right? When Michigan played man, we killed everybody, right? When we had the players to do it. All the 2018 season, it's, we're on the revenge tour. We're murdering everybody, and there's no answers, because everybody had RPO'd their systems up, and everybody had planned for all these zones, and all of a sudden, here's Michigan just getting in your face and saying, all right, beat me. And Ohio State said, well, okay, I can do that, right? I have the accurate quarterback, I have the pass protection, and I have the speed at receiver to beat that. And does Michigan have the pass protection? Does Michigan have the accuracy at quarterback? Does Michigan have the speed at receiver to beat that? Those are big questions that are still out there.
Yeah, I think the part of the perception, at least vis-a-vis receivers, could be wrong, is the fact that our quarterback play was so wretched. Michigan's quarterback play was the worst it had been since the year Harbaugh was injured, broke his arm against Michigan State, and whatever year that was. And that's
84.
a long, long time ago. And so, and it not only was the quarterback play bad, I mean, it was a rotating door of one sort of inefficiency after the next.
Right.
And so it's hard for me to lay it on the receivers or to say, oh, our receivers aren't that good. I'm not so sure. You know, I think McCulley can be a good receiver. I think Samaj can be a good receiver. I'm not saying these are all American type guys, but I think if you get past pro, you're going to have enough for them to do something. What's his name? Fred Moore. I think he could be a good receiver. I think he is a good receiver. So I'm not there yet on the wide receivers. You know, tell me we can
I would
block
say that
someone
they
and we'll be
can.
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they definitely there could be a player in Fred Moore. Like you ask, what would it look like? Now, if you look at the receiving stats last year,
Yeah.
they are the worst at Michigan since 1973. Okay. If you want to put Michigan's receiver production against Bo teams, they would be bottom third percentile among both Schembechler wide receiver offenses. So we are not just talking bad. We are talking about, ungodly bad. Now, first of all, Loveland was their main receiver last year.
Right.
But also, let's just go back to what they were dealing with, right? They get by the end of the season, they know we cannot throw the ball with Alex Orji because the defense knows they're not going to be able to throw downfield with him. They know we can't really just run the offense with Davis Warren. It's just not going to, he's going to short circuit. The play he got injured on, he had a guy open. He doesn't see it. He runs away to the sideline. He goes down 19 yards behind and then they got a cheap penalty because Alabama coach ran into the ref. But that was Davis Warren, right? They very, very limited player. And then once you had like Evan Link at left tackle, even when Evan Link was at right tackle, they couldn't pass protect. So you go and look at those game plans against Ohio State and Alabama last year, and they're not even pass protect. They don't have, I think there was like 8 pass sets in one of those games and 5 in the other. Like they did not drop back pass unless they absolutely had to. So you're talking about that they were taking it completely out of the offense. So can you pass protect? We don't know.
Yeah. So
that's the issue. I'll probably say it 1,000 times this year.
Yeah, we talked a lot of offensive line, so we'll pause and we'll come back and pick up that part of the conversation. No surprise that we're going to talk a lot of offensive line with Sharon Moore, right? And a lot of left tackle. So we'll pick that up on the other side. Stay tuned here on the Michigan Insider MGoBlog Roundtable on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at thebig1050.com.
Clear on radio.
Yeah, he was really bullish on the athletic upside of these 2 freshmen. He said, "Man, they're different than anything we've had around here." So we
talking Babalola
and Ty Haywood. He said we've not had guys like this here.
That's the best thing I've heard in a long time.
He said we have not had guys like this. They are absolutely different than what we've had. No question. Babalola is the guy that is really in the thick of contention for a starting spot. That he came in early, it really helps. And the amount of tutelage that they have on deck now. I mean, between you got all these offensive line coaches here. It's like,
well, yeah. I mean, Biff Poggi is the offensive line coach himself, right? Like, and then Biff had a guy that came with him through Charlotte, so I forgot his name, but he's around too. And then you got Juan Castillo for the interior, right?
Yeah, they say the guy. He said at one point, he said, Juan Castillo sleeps in the building, and I don't think he was. Part of me thought he was saying it tongue in cheek, but now I don't think he was. Like, I think he might have been. I think Juan Castillo might sleep in the building. He
did pretty well with our last IMG center. So,
well, that's. I mean, Seth, I think in something that you wrote, you were talking about your disappointment at center last year.
Yeah. Well, I went back and looked at the because Ryan had UFR the last few games, so I wanted to look at the Alabama and Ohio State games on the offensive line in particular, and get some charting on those guys, because that's, Ohio State's defensive line was just unreal last year, and Alabama had a great defensive line team. Where Damon Payne wasn't even starting on that team, so they had so I got to see them against some really tough competition, like NFL caliber defensive tackles. And what I saw from Crippen specifically was that he got all the calls right. He was not screwing up. It's not like something that he didn't know what he was doing. Crippen knows what he's doing. Crippen just got manhandled by those guys. He just was physically pushed out of the way by them. And that made me a little more concerned that I was hoping Juan Castillo would be able to come in and work his magic or something, but Crippen's just got to get a lot stronger. And that's hard to do. Sometimes you hit a cap, right? And my guess is that's probably what's been holding him back, and that's probably why we had that whole rigmarole last year with, trying to use a defensive tackle at center instead, because they probably were looking at him going, what are we going to do against Ohio State? This guy's going to get killed. And maybe that's just what Crippen is. But just getting the calls right is important. Do you remember Michigan beat Virginia Tech in a bowl game when David Molk was standing on one foot because he got the calls right? So that right
David
there.
David Molk was a whole other animal.
I know, but I don't want to I don't want to sound like I'm coming down hard on Crippen, because getting the calls right is super, super hard. And sometimes you just don't have the physical ability, but that mental acuity, he's got that.
Yeah, it was. I think there's probably going to be more of a battle in fall camp there than Sharon talked about at the end of spring. With Crippen being the obvious leader in the clubhouse, it's not to the level of left tackle and right guard, but I don't necessarily think it's not like okay, there's no challenger. I think he's going to be pushed, and not just in a keep you sharp type of way. I think he's going to be pushed to see if there really is someone who can unseat him for the reason that you mentioned.
Yeah, and you never know. He has another offseason. Centers also pop late, right? We've seen it a million times, especially at Michigan, where we had guys stick around for 4 years, and then this fifth-year starters are like, oh, all of a sudden here's a fifth-year center, and he's great, right?
Right, and Crippen. I mean, maybe he turns a corner physically in this year.
On radio in about 30.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, but I mean, the guy for me, and he mentioned, and this was an interesting thing for me, because it sounds like Babalola, his improvement is exponential, whereas the other ones are linear, which you would expect as a young guy, right? He's gonna improve rapidly, but I'm going Blake Frazier, man. I'm going Blake Frazier.
That'd be nice. It also allows you to move Link inside, which I know Nate Effaby would hate that, but that having that kind of size inside.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, have you looked at the
on radio
recruits?
in 5, 4, 3.
And we are here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at the big1050.com. Folks, before we get back to talking offensive line, that part of the conversation with Sharon Moore, which you can hear here on the Big 1050. We played that portion of the interview this morning. Much of the interview has been written up. I think he's up to I think Alejandro's up to 12 stories now from our exclusive chat with Sharon Moore from earlier in the week. You can find those on the MichiganInsider.com. And here in the next day or so, we're going to start posting the video from that interview with Sharon Moore. So be on the lookout for that, as we had an exclusive sit down with Sharon. But we'll start talking about what he had to say about the offensive line. After I tell those of you who want to market for a new vehicle that you should get on board with Brighton Ford, because Brighton Ford is your go-to destination for a new Ford. Step into the driver's seat of your dream car or truck, take it for a spin and feel the power and drive it home today. At Brighton Ford, you'll experience the difference. If you have a current Ford lease, transfer it to Brighton Ford. They'll pick up your current lease and deliver your new one right to your doorstep. It is that easy. And at Brighton Ford, you get employee pricing. It's available to everyone. That's right. You pay what we pay at Brighton Ford. 1-800-NEW-FORD. Get on board with Brighton Ford. I know a guy who got on board with Brighton Ford recently is Blake Frazier. He's got to be a big Ford for Blake to get on board, but he did. He's rolling around in the Ford from Brighton Ford, and Blake is finally healthy. That puts him in the mix, as Sharon was very candid in coming out in spring with the media at large. And he's talking about the offensive line. He said, I feel pretty confident with where we are at right tackle. He mentioned Sprague. He mentioned at left guard. He mentioned Giovanni Abadi. At center, he mentioned Greg Crippen as the guys he felt pretty sure about. But left tackle and right guard, right? And left tackle, we saw, man, it was just a real sore spot last year in the season where the offensive line was really porous at times. And it was a baptism by fire for Evan Link. Got a lot of experience, of course. And he was the first name that Sharon mentioned because of that experience. Well, no, scratch that. He was not the first name he mentioned. Blake Frazier was the first name he mentioned because that was the guy I asked about. I said, tell me about Blake Frazier, because he's the guy that no one outside of the program has seen.
Mm-hmm.
And now he is in the mix at the position, him being healthy. So how does he affect the competition? And he said he absolutely is in the thick of that competition now. He is fully healthy. He is really athletic. He is a legacy guy, comes from great stock. He's, Steve Frazier, who was here and was a part of a culture that propelled all the way to the mountaintop. So he has the requisite tools to be a guy here. So, but it is a competition, a major competition. That Evan Link has the advantage of experience. Got a lot of it under his belt last year that he is able to bring to the fold in camp. And then we started talking about Andrew Babalola. And a little bit later in the conversation, he was talking about how Andrew Babalola and Ty Haywood, from an athletic profile standpoint, are superior to any guy that they've had come through here. That doesn't mean that they're going to perform better than any guys they had come through here. He's just talking about just athletically, as far as their athletic gifts. These are the best that he's seen.
I mean, wasn't Miles Hinton pretty athletic? Like,
said as the best that he's seen at Michigan are these two guys that have just come through the door as far as athletic gifts. Now, whether they perform up to the level of those athletic gifts remains to be seen. But with Andrew Babalola, you also have the benefit of a guy that is tremendously, when you talk about his mental acuity, you talk about his football IQ is through the roof, and he came in early. And so when you throw all of those pieces together at a position of need, he's been improving rapidly, getting a lot stronger. He's over 300 pounds. He is absolutely in the mix at that left tackle spot. And we saw, you guys can speak to this, he got overpowered a few times in the spring game, right? Mm-hmm. Or ran around a couple times in the spring game, which you would expect from a young guy, but you would also expect, like we talked about in the break, for his improvement to be exponential, whereas the other guys might be more linear because he just came in, whereas they've been around for a little while.
Is Frazier, you still have the right guard problem. And out of high school, I know there was an issue, or not an issue, but a talk about whether Frazier was really a tackle or a guard in the first place.
Well, Sharon didn't talk about him in the tackle mix.
Okay.
He talked about native phobia. He talked about Hatar. I'm trying to remember all the names he mentioned at right guard off the top of my head. Those are two that I remember. Those are the two that come to me. Native phobia was the first name that came out.
I assume a phobia is the leader in the clubhouse to some extent, but there are other guys. And
yeah, my understanding of the depth chart after spring.
Nick Renera was another name he mentioned in there as well, who's also working at center. But the tackle spot is the one. I mean, look, that's your quarterback's backside, man. Obviously you can help him, but boy, I can't think of a more pressing position right now when it comes to who's going to be the biggest assist to whoever the quarterback is, but especially if it's Bryce, than that left tackle. And so who is that guy going to be? And I mean, he spoke glowingly about Babalola. I just still feel like, though, that the guy that is the best blend of upside, experience in the program, physical maturity as well is Blake Frazier. He just doesn't. We obviously haven't seen him on the field yet.
I don't like the idea of going to Norman, Oklahoma with a true freshman at quarterback and a true freshman at left tackle.
Yeah.
Like you could say, if the more they're talking about Babalola at like down the road, the better. The more they're talking about him now is an indictment on what they've got, because he came in. He wasn't just like, oh, this guy's super talented and ready to go. He was a 5-star because he's super talented, not because he was ready to go. The knock on Babalola is this guy's raw. He's going to need some time, and offensive linemen always need time. There is so much they throw at you, and you talk about Oklahoma. That is an elite defense. I'm not so certain about their offense. I'm a little more down on their quarterback than I was going in when I started actually watching the film. Oh yeah, yeah. He's a better version of Mikey Keene, Sam. he's all moxie. He has just got moxie. And whenever they say, like, oh, can he throw downfield? He's like, well, he's got more moxie than you've ever seen. But there's
all right, Seth. I think
he was. I mean, the competition that they were playing there, he just ripped them up. But there's they had a really good quarterback there the year before, and I saw major differences between the two of them.
Okay.
But I don't want to. I'm not saying he's terrible. In fact, he's probably going to be better than our true freshman, right? Like, there's ripping up the Mountain West and ripping up, the Southeast Michigan high schoolers are very different things. So we're not one to talk here. We're all Spider-Man pointing in this matchup. But our defense is elite as well, and their defense is elite as well. They've got great edges, and I'm very concerned what happens if we throw a true freshman out there against a very good defensive mind.
Yeah. Again, I've already said who I think it's going to be. Now it has to work out in practice that way. Blake is up to about 300 pounds. That's been his journey. You said there was some question about, is he inside or outside? To me, the question I always heard about Blake is putting on weight. Like, he had to get bigger. I think he came in at about 250. So he's had to put on the weight, but he's up to about 300 pounds now. Moving around really well. He's always been a really good athlete. And so staying healthy, being able to play, showing that he can move guys as well, that he's, much, much stronger too. If those things hold, like I think they will, then he can be the guy at left tackle. That's my pick. I think he brings some more nimbleness out there than we saw from Evan Link. Evan Link obviously is more experienced though. So how much will he play in camp? Time will tell. But yeah, there's a lot more. We didn't even get into who he said. There's a player he said, man, this guy, he won't just be one of the best players on the team. He'll be one of the best players in the Big Ten. Day one. He said that about TJ Metcalf.
Ooh.
Well, yeah, I'm a believer in that one from what I saw.
He's a starter in the SEC last year, so
Yeah.
I mean, there's, yeah. My read on him, I watched like a lot of Arkansas to get a read on him.
We got to wrap up. So we'll pick it
Okay,
up.
no. Saint Restilian, just really smart guy. That's what he is.
Yeah. So that'll do it for us today, here, folks. Be sure to check out the interview with Sharon Moore. The first half play today, second half play tomorrow. Plenty of stories on the MichiganInsider.com. Full video coming up on the Michigan Insider YouTube page, so be sure to check it out. We'll see you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at thebig1050.com.